Giving me this nice medal before I make my talk is rather like paying the waiter before he brings you the meal in the restaurant. I hope that I will not disappoint the confidence that you've shown in me. I'm very grateful to Rector Pontecarolo and Dean Cantorius, and my old friends, Cecilia O'Neill, Alfredo Boulard, and my young friend, Oscar Sumar. And to all the professors to whom I now say thank you, colleagues. I would also say how honored I am that the president of the Constitutional Tribunal, Oscar Urviola, has come here today. I know how busy he is, and I'm touched that he has taken this time. I'm also delighted to find that the dean of the law school from the Católica is here, and I'm pleased to see so many of you. Well, as a professor, I don't get paid much, but it's a great job because I get to travel all over the world without spending the money that I don't get paid. And traveling around and spending the money you don't get paid, not spending the money you don't get paid, is almost as good as getting paid and spending it. And one of the things I discovered in my travels when I came here with my family is what a great country Peru is. I really believe that Cusco is the most beautiful 17th century city in the Western Hemisphere. There's nothing like it. Rebuilt after the earthquake in the 17th century when there was a lot of money, a lot of taste, a lot of elegance, on the former capital of the Inca Empire. There's nothing like it. It's really a fabulous city. And of course, Machu Picchu is the most mysterious town in the world. And in addition, I saw something I couldn't believe, which is people playing football on the water at Lake Titicaca. I thought only Jesus and his disciples could organize such a game, but there I saw it with my eyes. Now, these are wonderful sights that should bring anyone to Peru. But because of who I am, there's something that I like even better. And what I like even better are ideas. When I was in New Zealand 15 years ago, there was a beach outside the town of Dunedin where there was a colony of penguins. Nobody knew quite why they were there, but there they were, eating and mating and fighting and having a good time. And when I came to Peru for the first time, I didn't realize that the ecology of ideas was right here for law and economics. But when I came here and I met people, I came to understand that this is the land of Alfredo Boulard, of Enrique Gersi, of Guillermo Cabreses, of Enrique Pasquel. There's the young scholars like Oscar Sumar and Cesar Bismarck. And maybe part of the ground on which all of this is being made was prepared by Hernando de Soto. But for whatever reason, there is an ecology of ideas here in which I believe that law and economics is flourishing, and it's my pleasure and my delight to come here and to exchange ideas about the subject that I love. It's the first thing I think of when I get up in the morning, and the last thing I think of when I go to bed. Now, why should we care about ideas? Aren't ideas just the superstructure? And what's really the base is materiality, power and money. That's the view of the materialists. And the opposite view from that is the view of the idealists. And the great economist of the Depression, John Maynard Keynes, was an idealist. And he wrote some very memorable words that I'm going to read to you. He wrote these words in his book, The General Theory, in 1936. The ideas of economists and political philosophers, both when they are right and when they are wrong, are more powerful than is commonly understood. Indeed, the world is ruled by little else. Practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influence are usually the slaves of some defunct economist. Madmen in authority who hear voices in the air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler of a few years back. I'm sure that the power of vested interests is vastly exaggerated compared with the gradual encroachment of ideas. Well, that's a beautiful testament to the career that we in the university devote ourselves to, the career of ideas. Now, in my academic career, I've written many books and papers. And one of the things I always have to do is to suppress myself and be very disciplined. But now you've given me this in advance. I've already got it. So I don't have to suppress myself anymore. Now I can tell you what I think, how I feel, which is something I don't think I have ever done in an academic setting before. And what I think and what I feel is this. It's better to be born today than yesterday, and it will still be better to be born tomorrow than today. We are in a golden age of progress, a period in which there is progress, and it's going at a faster rate. And that's because of this. When Albert Einstein was asked, what is the most powerful force in the universe, he replied, compound interest. Compound growth. Now, I'm old now, and many of the things I remember best never really happened. Perhaps this never really happened, I don't know, but it's surely what he should have answered. Because compound growth is the strongest force that changes the world. I was in China in 1994, and I returned again in 2004, and I didn't know where I was. It was as if the airplane had made a mistake and landed in the wrong country, a country that was rich, not the country I remembered. That's because China had enjoyed 10% compound growth during the period that I was away. Now, I've had similar experiences in other countries where it's not as dramatic, but it's still dramatic. Mexico, Brazil, maybe even Peru. I'm not sure I've been away from Peru long enough to come back and know, but I have that feeling. Compound growth is changing the world, and it happens unimaginably fast. 2% of growth, 2% rate of growth for a century, which is roughly the growth rate that the United States has enjoyed, increases the wealth of the nation by almost 7 times. 2%, 7 times in a century. 10% growth, the growth rate that China has enjoyed for 30 years. 10% growth does not increase the wealth of the country 100 times, not 1,000 times, not 10,000 times. It increases 14,000 times. And that's simply a mathematical fact. Compound growth occurs faster than we can imagine, and that is why it is the most powerful force in the universe where social welfare and our society is concerned. Now, I believe that compound growth will continue. I'll tell you why in a minute. And I also believe that it is going to have some remarkably wonderful effects. Certainly, with respect to income and wealth, it's going to lead to the elimination of the poverty of nations. By the poverty of nations, I mean nations where the nation is poor, the income per capita is low, very low. I don't necessarily mean all the poverty within a nation. All the poverty within the nation is another set of problems. This group of people who are left behind in economic progress and must be helped, that's a special set of problems. But the notion of poor nations is going to cease. Already, the developing nations have become the middle-income nations in some places. And this tendency will continue. Now, in addition to changing our lives and increasing our welfare, unimaginably fast. Compound growth has a remarkable ability to end war. On May 10th, 1940, Germany invaded France. In May of 1963, I waited 2 hours in a car to cross the border between Germany and France. Now, you can cross the border by train or car without even knowing it. The train, which is going 170 miles an hour, does not slow down. Now, war is over, not just because, well, it's over because now it is unthinkable. And because it is unthinkable, there is no preparation for war. And because there is no preparation for war, you can ride a fast train right across the border. Now, the French economist in the 19th century, Bastiat, said, "Where goods do not cross frontiers, armies will." And the opposite is also true. Where goods cross frontiers, in time, with compound growth, armies will not cross those frontiers. Already, we see that today. It's not just that Europe has been united by free trade and economic growth in a way that armies could not do for 2,000 years. But we're seeing it at other places as well. For example, take the United States and China. Right now, the Chinese own so much American debt that America is not in a position to seriously threaten the Chinese if we wanted to. And now, China owns so much of our debt, they would be crazy to threaten us and not get paid. So, the exchange of debt, which is this imbalance in payments, which is bad economics, is brilliant politics. It is a powerful force for peace. Now, in addition to raising human welfare and ending war, I believe that compound growth will also end dictatorship. The same way it did in Korea, the same way that it did in Taiwan. And the reason for that has to do with what makes compound growth occur. What is behind the strongest force in the universe. And here I would like to point out something to you. When you were in high school, you probably learned the theorem of Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem, which relates the length of two sides of a triangle to the third side. Now, this Pythagorean theorem is over 2,000 years old. And you know, there is still just as much of it left. We've been using it for 2,000 years, and none of it has been used up. It's not like coal. Not only has none of it been used up, but we've continued to make better and better mathematics by generalizing and increasing the power of the insight that Pythagoras had. If you want to read a wonderful book on that, there's a book called Fermat's Last Theorem, which I commend to you. So, what we know is that ideas can grow on top of ideas without using anything up. And that is the secret to compound growth. In the end, what must drive compound growth is better ideas. In that respect, I believe the same thing as Keynes. Keynes, by the way, also wrote an essay in 1930 called The Economic Prospects of Our Grandchildren, in which he argued, indeed he foresaw, the incredible wealth that we now enjoy, even though he was writing in 1930 in the depths of a horrible depression. Now, it is by better ideas that build on themselves, the pyramid, that we get compound growth. But it is not only through ideas. In this respect, idealism is wrong. Because the ideas that benefit the most also require capital. They require money. We have to combine ideas with capital in order to develop the ideas into things that we want, that are useful, that are valuable to us. And ideas and money repel each other. it's very hard to bring them together. Let me give you an example. I have on my computer, and I use most days, a program called EndNote. And EndNote is a way that I can organize and keep the notes that I take on all the wonderful talks that I hear. That's what I do at a Life Day. I take notes on EndNote. And then later I can cite them with ease. EndNote was developed by a friend of mine named Richard Niles. And Richard Niles' hope and his fear was that he would get a call from Microsoft. Because he did not have enough money to develop EndNote thoroughly or to market it well. He just brought it to the stage where it was a demonstrably good product. But he couldn't take it to the next stage with his own money. And he hoped that Microsoft would call him up and make him rich by buying his program. And he feared that Microsoft would call him up and make him poor by stealing his program. So he feared the call from Microsoft. And then one day it came. And it was Microsoft trying to sell him Microsoft Word. He never got the call about EndNote. He did, however, get a call by a very large publishing house called Thomson, to whom he sold it, became very rich, and bought a nice house in downtown San Francisco. Now, the point is this. Silicon Valley is what it is, not primarily, in my view, because of the presence of Stanford and Berkeley. They make a big difference, but that's not just it. The main thing is Silicon Valley has figured out how to combine money with new ideas. Because the people with the ideas, like my friend Richard Niles, who invented EndNote, is afraid that the people with money will steal the ideas. And the people with money is afraid that people like Richard Niles will steal the money. And there's both of those kinds of theft going on all the time in Silicon Valley. And in order to control that theft, to prevent it from occurring, to make sure that ideas can be used to develop, money can be used to develop new ideas. In order to accomplish that, you need a lot of law. You especially need the law of property, contracts, corporations, finance, and bankruptcy. These are the areas of law on which Silicon Valley has been built. And in Silicon Valley, there are some remarkable innovations in those institutions. Silicon Valley had venture capital before anyone else. And one of the forms of venture capital which I'm most familiar, because I also started the Silicon Valley firm, and I went through this personally, one of the forms that I'm most familiar with is the form of venture capitalism practiced by lawyers. You know, if you're a lawyer here, if you're a law student, and you're interested in the subject of contracts, don't aspire to be the person who simply executes the contract that is drawn up by the executives. You should try to be the person who helps draw up the contract, who helps develop the idea of what the relationship between those parties should be, because often there is a very difficult incentive problem. A problem such as making sure that the investors don't steal the idea and the person with the idea doesn't steal the money. That's the kind of thing that you need to specialize in if you want to be at the center rather than at the periphery of business innovation. And that's the way the lawyers work in Silicon Valley. The largest Silicon Valley law firm is called Wilson Sonsini Goodrich & Rosati. Mr. Sonsini was the lawyer for my company. And when we signed a contract with Mr. Sonsini, we needed a lot of law. We had no employment contracts. We had no sales contracts. We didn't even have a corporate form. We had to work out the best corporate form with respect to liability and taxation. There were lots of things we had to do. And what the Sonsini law firm did is they deferred any payment from us and took stock. They took stock in our company. They were venture capitalists. If we succeeded, they succeeded. If we failed, they failed. That's what a venture capitalist does. And this form of remuneration that we arranged is illegal in much of the world. I often spend time in Hamburg, Germany, and in Germany, a law firm can't take the stock of a client. It's not allowed. Okay, well, you're not going to have venture capital. You're not going to have lawyers practicing venture capital if you don't know that. So I think much of the success of Silicon Valley has to do with the institutional developments there built around legal innovation. I describe the basic problem of bringing ideas and capital together as the double trust dilemma. The dilemma of how you get each one to trust the other, and the solution is intensely legal. I think we're getting better at that solution. I think the institutions, such as those in Silicon Valley, are spreading around the world, and they're being strengthened and differentiated where they go. This is great for humanity. You know, if my life goes its typical course, probably in 10 to 15 years I should have cancer. That would be the usual course. And if you ask me, well, I hope I can delay it as long as possible, because I would like to live as long as I can, but also because I'd like it to come when science is even better, because it keeps getting better. And furthermore, for me, this is not a matter of national competition. You see, if I get cancer in 15 years, and the person who figured out how to solve it is a scientist in Shanghai, and his Shanghai company owns the patent on the drugs that I need, I don't mind. I say, go for it, Shanghai. Develop that cancer drug for the world. It's like the Pythagorean theorem. You'll get paid for a while, but we'll use it for a long time. We'll use it for a long time, and we'll all get more out of it in benefit than we ever pay you. Otherwise, we wouldn't buy the drug from you in the first place. And when I get cancer, I'm going to be willing to pay a lot for the drug. So I think that we are developing the institutions around the world to make compound growth universal, to make this occur everywhere. And unlike the pessimists who believe the rate of growth is going to slow down, I believe the opposite. China now, by some accounts, has about as many middle-class people as the United States. When China has as many PhDs as the United States, when China has as many research labs as the United States, there's going to be an acceleration in growth in the whole world, because the person who develops a new idea doesn't just keep it to himself to make money. It's got to be produced and used by others, and that is the way ideas build upon themselves and growth compounds. Now, I told you that I thought compound growth, besides ending poverty, besides raising the living standards of us all, besides bringing peace, it might also bring us freedom from dictatorship. It might bring us liberty. And that's not a very complicated idea, because the characteristic of innovation is it's unexpected. It comes from unexpected places. This is one of the things that I love about the opera. I go to the opera. For example, one of the young opera stars that's all the ladies love now is from Peru. One of the opera stars in San Francisco. You go to the opera in San Francisco, and there are the tenor's from Peru. The bass is from the Ukraine. The soprano is from Italy. And the mezzo-soprano is from Minneapolis. That's the opera. You see, God gives us opera singers, and it's up to us to find it. And it's the same way with ideas. I don't know where these crazy, creative people come from. Somehow God makes them. And we have to set them free. We have to make them free so that they can create and benefit all of us. In the 18th century, Adam Smith changed fundamentally the view of economics by teaching people that the wealth of the nation was not the gold that it held in vaults, but the productivity of its people. And in this century, in the new century, we are going to understand that the wealth of nations is not so much the productivity as the creativity of these people. It's not the ability to produce with given resources, which economists describe as economic efficiency. It's the ability to produce compound growth by innovating and creating new things. The new law in economics must be a law in economics of creativity that focuses on giving entrepreneurs, innovators, the kind of freedom that they require. And the kind of freedom that they require, I describe in a single phrase, which is legalized freedom. Legalized freedom. And the reason I say legalized freedom is this. The freedom that the entrepreneur needs is not the absence of law. You often hear about how regulations stifle business, which they do. There's no businessman in the world who doesn't feel plagued by senseless regulations. We have too many regulations, but we also don't have enough regulations. The problem is, legalizing freedom is not a matter of the absence of law, it's the presence of good law. The presence of good law that enables us to create. In particular, it's the law of property, contracts, corporations, securities, and bankruptcy. With those laws in place, with a good legal framework, people are free to follow their entrepreneurial impulse and create. Now, I happen to think the kind of business creativity is self-expressive. It's not just instrumental. I spent one summer thinking that I should become a poet. And every day I walked in the mountains of Colorado and I wrote poetry. And at the end of the summer, I threw it all away and decided to become an economist. Showing that I was a bad poet, but a pretty good critic. You know, some people say that economics is like accounting, but without the sex appeal. Well, anyway, I became an economist, and I can't write poetry, but there are two things that I'm good at. I'm good at ideas, and I'm good at business. And being creative with ideas and business have brought me one of the two things that are necessary to happiness, in my opinion. I consider myself a happy man, and for two reasons. First of all, I've had earned success. That is to say, I have had some success in the world, not as much as I would like, perhaps more than I deserve, but much of my success has been earned. It's been earned by my effort, my hard work, and my creativity, and that's a major contributor to happiness. And of course, the other thing that you need is reflective love. You need someone whom you love to also love you. And if you have earned success and you have reflective love, I think you have the basis of happiness. Well, it's hard for the state to arrange for us to have reflective love. However, it's possible for the state to legalize freedom and therefore to unleash the power of compound growth, which has the instrumental values of making us wealthy, eliminating poverty, bringing us peace, and bringing us freedom. And it has the instrumental value of expressing our creativity. Thank you.
Antes de pasar a la segunda parte del programa, vamos a pasar a un café en el hall principal del edificio en el primer nivel y terminamos el programa en 15 minutos. Nos esperamos.